One of the scariest and most misunderstood parts of the awakening process is what I'm about to describe, and ask me how I know. Where one day you wake up and everything is perfect. There's nothing to do. You suddenly realize your pain was perfect. Everything is part of this divine, beautiful plan. There's really nothing to fix. Your trauma is perfect. Even bypassing, somehow you find perfection in everything. And this feels true. And it's not a thought. It's not an understanding. It is a felt experience, which often brings complete bliss, laughter, tears of joy, and really great feelings all around. Now, the problem arises when people claim this or get stuck here and somehow fail to recognize that there is still a human traversing the world that still has relationships, still has dishes to do, and still has probably issues and learned habitual patterns that are not healthy or helping anyone, can become one of the most severe spiritual bypassing traps. Ooh, it almost got me a few times, honestly, and I'm still navigating how to go about this. Being human, doing things, and sometimes even working on my own habits, although I don't feel that I need to, because the general feeling in my body and in my experience is that everything is absolutely perfect the way it is. Makes it very challenging to work on things or to try to change or to have goals or to do anything really in the human experience. So it's the challenge of, when you're really poor, you think money's going to fix your problems. And then when you're really rich, you stress out about losing your money. So it's just a problem on either side of the story. And the same thing can happen with a real shift. The seeking mind relaxes, the identity loosens, the pressure to become something dissolves completely. And really, for the first time in your life, there is a felt experience that there is nothing to be solved. This is where seeking ends. But here is the little subtle trick. Just because being is perfect doesn't mean the human is finished. And those are not the same thing. And I'm speaking from experience. I'm still learning this. I'm not speaking as someone who has mastered this. I am still in this process. It is a strange thing to experience and let unfold while also being cautious that I am not above anyone and I can still be caught in deception or bypassing or any of the human traits that aren't so great. It can happen to me, it can happen to anyone, even in this state that I am now in and that I share from. At first, I got in here very immaturely and shared that there's no story, there's no self, everything's perfect. And it's true. I was in the honeymoon period. It was beautiful. And I still feel that way 10 months later. But as things come up, as things have perfected, as my children often show me where I'm lacking or where I need to be more patient, I'm starting to realize that even though I feel like there's nothing to be done and everything is perfect, for the benefit of the people around me, I do want to grow. It's letting the human experience evolve and mature, but not trying to be perfect for the sake of gaining or getting peace, which is kind of the ego's game. So ultimately, nothing needs improvement, and everything is perfect, and there is no doer, and there is no self, and the sense of I dissolves when you really investigate it closely. But in the relative, there's still a human body, there's still a nervous system, there's still habitual patterns, wounds, habits, blind spots, immature coping strategies. That stuff doesn't disappear with awakening. It gets seen through. And even after a little vacation, I'm realizing that I need to stay grounded enough to actually look at and feel through some of this stuff, even though I feel like I don't need to. this is the tricky part. Awakening reveals the absence of the self. It doesn't magically mature the human organism. Sadly. I wish it did. In some ways it does, but not all the ways. So seeing through the character doesn't always teach the character how to deal with emotions, how to sit with pain and not shut down, how to have empathy for others' pain even if you're not able to feel it in the moment. And this is where bypassing becomes second nature, easy, overlooked, not even noticed, honestly. People start saying things like, well, there's no one to heal. Who would do the work? Or that's just ego. And here's the trick. That's not wrong. That is true. But here's what happens next. They stop feeling grief. They stop confronting fear. They stop repairing relationships. They stop owning when they hurt someone. They stop developing emotional range. This one has happened to me. I am working through and through it right now, but there was a time where I just kind of fell flat because what's there to do? Other people would have emotions around me and I didn't really respond. And then there are, now as I'm working through this and noticing this, it is true that nothing needs to change, but it's also true that I can cry with somebody and have empathy with someone to help them in whatever they are in, to be there with them presently. I don't have to share what I feel and what I know, and I'm not going to tell them everything is perfect because that's extremely inappropriate in a lot of situations and would be super hurtful because they're not feeling that. What they're feeling is real. And if I am present, I can really meet them there instead of spiritually bypassing and telling myself or that other person, oh, it's all an illusion. It doesn't matter. Everything's perfect. Ooh, it's a rough one. And honestly, I've failed enough times to know now that that's not a great way to do this stuff. So this may sound weird or contradictory, but when you know, you know. When you get here, you'll know what I'm saying. And maybe hearing it before you're here, just we'll put a little seed where it needs to be. But you can be disidentified from the ego and still very embodied in the human. And that is what I really want to share on here, because I see either way is dangerous. If you completely disidentify from all human experience and you're just floating above everybody, you develop this weird spiritual superiority thing. It's just not healthy for anyone. And then there's the opposite, where you're completely in your body and you haven't really felt or realized the truth that everything's okay. So you are thrown around and tossed by the waves of emotion. The truth is in between those two. It's wildly intuitive and really takes an initial shift to even begin to see some of this stuff and realize this stuff. So if this sounds confusing, don't try to figure it out. Just ignore it until the shift happens, or feel into what I'm saying. Don't try to make a mental model of it, because that's not helpful. So what we don't want to be is awake and distant, clear but cold, spacious but unavailable. So sometimes if people say things like, I don't feel anger anymore, I don't get attached, I don't suffer like I used to, those can be very genuine, and I've probably said all of those things. Occasionally, it's disassociation covered in spiritual language, and I'm speaking for myself as well. So the awakening process itself, without the integration, can actually seize development. It really takes just some time and some maturity to see this stuff. And I didn't have it in the beginning when I started sharing. I'm slowly seeing it now, because it took me a while, sadly. It can just slow or pause your growth when you see the truth, but then stop looking at the human. You become kind of an awake, enlightened adolescence, like a child that knows too much, that's seen too much. The truth landed, but it never moved into the body. So In my specific case, the truth kind of showed up in my body. It was through an emotional breakdown and releasing of so many hard, intense emotions at once that it kind of felt like I shifted from my head to my heart and something in my chest opened up and there became this very spacious, peaceful, open space. But it took months after that. Like I didn't do any work. I stopped reading books. I quit listening to videos. I couldn't even handle information. And that was fine. I just needed to rest and be in the nothing. But over time, it started to become boring and bland and flat. And I thought, is there more? Am I missing something? Just like a little whisper. It didn't seem like it came from the ego, so I just kind of put it on the back burner and just waited to see what would unfold. And what has unfolded, the people, the places, the books that have been coming into my life in the last few weeks have been showing me where I kind of got stuck in this place of peace without integrating. And very recently I've started to look more at my patterns and start letting the truth change the patterns. It's not about fixing. It's just about being. But sometimes there's still work to be done in the relative, even if you glimpse or live in the ultimate. So when there is a big internal shift, it does delete or heal a lot all at once. But if we're being honest with ourselves, if I'm honest with myself, there was some leftovers. And the integration process is being able to look at what is left, what was untouched by that initial shift, and feel it, look at it, be honest with it, and just letting it arise, even though I have that ultimate feeling of peace and like there is nothing to be done. It kind of takes some practice because it's easy to ignore problems in the awakened state because you don't really feel like it's a problem, which can be a problem. Some of this stuff is tricky and just kind of annoying, but this is why I'm sharing, because it's so subtle that you miss it, and I missed it. I missed, some of these little signs. So here's the paradox. One of many. There are many paradoxes. Before this shift takes place, all the work you're doing is driven by becoming something. It's ego-driven. Now, when that energy dies, there's nothing left. Your motivation dies too, because everything that was motivating you to become something got deleted. What's left, it's motivated now from love and presence. So before I kind of tricked myself into thinking, I don't need to do that. But now I'm realizing, I can do all the work I want on myself. It's just out of love. I'm not trying to become anything or be perfect. It's just from a different place. It's not motivated by any of the ego motivations. So where there was a hard emotion before, or a habit that I didn't want to look at because it was deemed as not great, I would run away from that into coping mechanisms, or the ego would drive that shame to push me away from looking at it. But now that that force isn't there, all that's left is love. And now that I have the ability to stay with uncomfortable feelings, or look at or be present during a bad habit in the middle of it, I can really meet it with presence. And presence, awareness, and love are what changes, not guilt and shame and all that other stuff. So the integration happens when you feel instead of try to float above, when you stay instead of try to escape, when you listen instead of try to explain yourself, and when you repair instead of transcend. And there's nothing forcing you to do this work. That's why it matters. And there's nothing super spiritual about this. Real integration looks fantastically ordinary. And that's how I describe how I feel these days. Fantastically ordinary. Feels like I have a perfectly regulated nervous system. So it can look like apologizing without collapsing, setting boundaries without going into a spiral justification, feeling anger without doing anything about it or acting it out, feeling grief without calling it illusion, and just being human without pretending you're above it. The deeper realization past there is no self is this: I don't need to escape this life anymore. That's it. This shift shows you that there's nothing wrong with reality. There was just your resistance to what is. When the resistance dies, everything is perfect. So if awakening shows you that there's nothing wrong with reality, integration would ask, can you now stop abandoning the human inside of it? Can truth live in your nervous system? Can love move through your behavior? Can clarity show up in how you speak, how you listen, or how you stay with your own emotions or with someone else's? So I am learning personally that the work didn't end. The motivation behind it, or the place that it comes from, has completely shifted. And honestly, it took a while for me to figure this out. It's been 9 or 10 months. I just rested in peace for a long time. And this is kind of where I've landed, is learning how to be the best version of this human self in the illusion while seeing through it at the same time. You know, it's like lucid dreaming. You wake up in a dream. You didn't really wake up. You wake up to be aware that you are in a dream dreaming, so suddenly you realize you can do whatever you want. So you are now aware in the dream, which puts you at this awesome level of advantage or fun or just playfulness. But you're still in the dream, and that's kind of like life. You can say you woke up, or there's an awakening process or a perceptual shift, but we're still here. Otherwise, people would have an awakening and just disappear, dissolve, die, and go somewhere else. I don't know. That's not how it works. We still have to move around in the relative world and learn how to do it without the motivations of ego. So a true awakening is just the end of seeking, which feels awesome. And then integration is the beginning of embodiment. And that seems to be where the path gets pretty real. And that is where I'm at 10 months after my initial shift, and that's where I'm sharing from. I'm not some enlightened guru. I know people are going to disagree or have comments about what I say, but I'm just sharing from where I'm at, from what I'm seeing in the most honest way that I can. Hopefully it helps some people.